Hey everybody, how's it going in Drum Talk TV land? Tell us where you're watching from. I'm Dan Shinder here on Drum Talk TV in Globe, Arizona. Where I live here and I don't know where it is. I don't know how I find my way home. Actually, it's up in the mountains 100 miles east of Phoenix, and way down in the desert to the left of me is Alvin Taylor in the Palm Springs Cathedral City area. Alvin, welcome. How are you, brother?
I'm so blessed. Thank you so much for having me, Dan. I'm excited about this show and about being here and seeing you. I'm excited. It's
Thank
cool.
you. We've done a few interviews at the NAM show, which is just a totally different thing. It's noisy, it's short. We can't really dig into some stuff. It's more like how you doing, what you got going on. Great, see you later. That's about it. But we're gonna dig deep into some stuff. And folks, I'm watching. I promise you, not like when Carmine appeases on the show. I'm not watching the Flintstones over here. I'm watching your comments come through on the show. So tell us where you're watching from. Let us know if you have questions for Alvin. Shout outs on favorite material he's played on. Just as a quick introduction, in case you've lived under a rock for the last 60 whatever years, Alvin got his start as a professional musician at age, I thought I was an early bloomer. I toured for the first time at 15. Alvin toured for the first time at 14 with some flash in the pan artist named Little Richard. Most of you probably haven't heard of him. But it sparked his career, and he ended up playing with people like George Harrison, Billy Preston, Elton John, War, and then played with Eric Burdon after he left War. Sammy Hagar. Sammy Hagar's version of sitting on the dock of the bay with another flash in the pan musician, Leland Sklar, an okay bass player, I guess, who's gotten around, Billy Thorpe, America, Cher, Natalie Cole, Sly and the Family Stone, and more. And Alvin, that reminds me, I don't know if you know this. You've met my wife, Enja. Her cousin is Larry Graham from Sly and the Family Stone. Isn't that a trip? That's her maiden name, Graham.
Awesome.
So, I want to start with this. At 14, touring with Little Richard, and I'm sure you didn't see anything you weren't supposed to, but how was he a mentor to you? What were some of the first biggest things you learned about the business and playing in a band and supporting a lead artist, and kind of talk about that and how you got the gig as well?
Well, first of all, the most important thing I learned from Richard was shut up. Shut up. Yeah.
That's where my wife got it from.
It's funny. Richard was just an amazing person. I learned quite a bit from him. Let's talk about how I got discovered. I was at the Biltmore Hotel working as a busboy. I had just gotten promoted to from the dishwasher to the busboy. And this band called the Soul Patrol used to play there. The Soul Patrol was a pretty soulful little band, had this drummer, Ernie Hernandez. I don't know if anyone ever heard of him before.
Yeah.
Say his name, Ernie Hernandez. Ernie Hernandez would get drunk and like pass out and couldn't play some of the stuff, and I don't know if it's the same Ernie Hernandez. This might be another Ernie Hernandez.
Okay.
Anyway, Ernie couldn't really play the gig, and so I thought, you know what, when I heard this gap, I talked to the guitar player, Arky, who was the band leader. I said, hey, listen, I play drums. He's like, hey, kid, get out of here. You bother me. Kind of like, I'm too young for this stuff. And
Yeah.
no, honestly, I can really play. So he didn't listen too much, but
So you
finally
looked 14? Like you looked like a young man, a 14-year-old, basically?
sure, yeah.
Okay.
And he was like not really wanting to hear it. And so I kept bugging him. Finally, he's like, okay, well, let's see what you got. And we'll come on a Saturday when Ernie's not here and he can play on his set and he won't know you played his drums. And so I went in there and played. He was like, oh my God, wait. He couldn't wait to tell the rest of the guys. And he wanted to talk to the owner of the hotel to see if I could, in the interim, sit in with him and play because I'm the bus boy.
Yeah.
So the owner was like, he didn't like the idea too much. He's like, well, what's your concern? Well, yeah, as long as the tables are bust, all right, let him, you can play. So one night, um, Ernie got drunk, got totally inebriated. He set out. They called for me to come and sit in. I sat in, and as I was playing, I looked at the door, the front door, and I seen Little Richard, Sammy Davis Jr., Billy Preston, and Frank Sinatra. All four of them walked in at the same time.
First of all, I love that you knew who they were at 14.
Well, let me tell you, I didn't know. I did.
Oh,
Listen, I didn't. I mean, I know who Frank Sinatra and I know who Sammy Davis was. I
okay.
did not know who Billy Preston was. I didn't know who Little Richard was. So when I was asked uh, to meet Little Richard and that he wanted to meet me and wanted me to play in his band, well, you know, I'm from Palm Springs. I grew up on the Indian reservation. The only band that I can think of is the Agua Caliente, you know, Cahuilla Band of Indians, you know.
Right.
So when he was like, I want you, ooh, honey, he says, when I saw you play them drums, he said, my big toe just shot straight up in my boots. And I wanted to scream. He was like a white lady. He said, honey, I ain't seen no drummer like that since I left Macon, Georgia. And I was like, you know, wow.
Great.
So he was really kind of blowing me away. And but later on, I found out that they were having a big party. Richard was actually, because people were saying, well, you know, I don't, that mixture of people, I don't get it. Well, Frank Sinatra, he owned a label called Reprise Records.
Yeah.
They were distributed by Warner Brothers, and they had just signed Little Richard. And so Richard was on that label, and they were giving him like a welcome party to. So the party spilled over from Frank's house, and they all came over to Biltmore to have drinks, and you know, Billy was, of course, was in Richard's band, and so I ended up at the International Hotel in Las Vegas, opening up the show for Elvis Presley and Little Richard's band after a long, hard fight because my mom wasn't having it. She didn't want me in the band. Richard not wanting to be outdone after asking my mom twice and her turning me down, saying absolutely not. Richard wanting to know what the concern was. I had his manager, Bumps Blackwell, come and negotiate the deal. Bumps was a totally great negotiator. I mean, hey, if he can get him in Las Vegas, opening up the show for Elvis Presley, I mean, I'm sure we could talk my mom into coming in, allowing me to be in the band. So he wanted to know what my concerns were and what my mom's concerns were. And my mom said, hey, he's 14 years old, hasn't finished school. Oh, we'll have a tutor on the road with him, and he'll be flying first class with Richard, and he won't have, you know, he'll have stay in a suite adjoining, a door adjoining, a room adjoining the suite of Little Richard, and he'll have his own bodyguard, you know, and he'll fly first class with Richard and all that. So my mom was like, and oh yeah, here's the most important part. He'll be making X amount of dollars, which was some real good dollars back that day. And my mom's question was, how much did you say? When do I help him pack?
That's awesome. And what year was this?
Oh God, this was 67, 68, 68 or 69.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly the year.
Yeah.
And so when I ended up in Las Vegas, Nevada, we had this guitar player named Jimmy James playing with us. Nobody really knew too much of who he was, even though he had cut a few albums. And I think maybe this is one album. He had cut at least one album. He played on other albums with like the Isley Brothers, and he did some stuff with James Brown. And he had worked with Richard before, but here he was with us in Las Vegas. And when somebody said years later, hey, look at this album, it's Jimi Hendrix. And I'm like, looking at the album, I said, Jimi Hendrix? I didn't know Jimi Hendrix. That's Jimmy James. He used to play guitar in my band with Little Richard, you know. So Jimi Hendrix was playing guitar, Billy Preston was playing organ, and Little Richard was playing piano. And we opened up in Las Vegas at the International Hotel. That's how I got started.
Wow. Crazy. So did your mom come around and eventually or quickly support you as a working musician?
Oh, it's a whole nother story. Unfortunately, my mom had to work really hard to kind of try to keep ends, make ends meet.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just, she was so used to doing that. She just sort of left me to my own devices, knowing that I was in good hands with Richard's people,
Yeah.
and sort of didn't really worry about what I was doing. Um, and it's a long story about how I grew up on the Indian reservation and
Mm.
how we basically, it was no secret in Palm Springs that it was a land of the rich and famous, and people were coming there to have, you know, extra property if they can get away property, and it's,
Right.
you know, that's in the land of the rich and famous, and so rich folks and were coming here, and but that was no secret. But the dark secret was is that there were people of color, indigenous people, Latinos and blacks that were living on the reservation because the Indians would allow it. They would let us rent the land, but we would have to build our own houses. So my dad couldn't, because of the color of his skin, unfortunately, uh, couldn't get a loan to get the material to build his house. He was a carpenter,
Oh.
but so he had to work hard enough to save the money. Once he saved the money, he built our house on the reservation. And the city of Palm, and not only us, two or three or four, 500 other people did the same thing. But they were poor people because that was the only place that we could live. They would want us to live in that city because they didn't want us to be a disgrace to the city, so to speak, or whatever. So later on, what they did is they came and they gave us 30 days to move, or they told us they were going to bulldoze and burn down our houses, and that's exactly what they did. A
Wow.
lot of with stuff in it. And 60 years later, now the city has come forward with an apology. The state attorney general considered it as they called it a city engineered Holocaust.
Wow.
And so it was a real lot of crazy stuff going on, racially crazy stuff back in the day when that was all happening. It made it very difficult for my mom to participate and, be a part of what I was doing, unfortunately.
Thanks for sharing that. I want to check comments real quick and see who's watching. If anyone's chiming in, folks, let us know in case you joined us after the intro. Let us know where you're watching from if you have any questions. There's always some troll whenever we do a live interview. There's always a troll in the comments. Let me see if I can pronounce his name correctly. It's Billy Ammon. Oh, Billy Amendola. I'm teasing Billy. Billy Amendola, formerly of Modern Drummer Magazine, now has his own podcast in association with Drumtown. Billy, shout out to you. Much love to you. Happy New Year. Awesome. So, and I have to mention this because even if anyone follows the show at all, and even to my son, Steven's surprise, the associate producer, everyone might be wondering, why is Dan dressed up? Quick story. My wife and I thought we were going to go to Las Vegas to visit some of the kids last week, but we didn't. But we saved Friday to just go down to the Phoenix Valley, go to a mall, which we rarely do, just eat at some neat places we've never been to. So we're at this mall, we're at this really neat clothing store, and I saw this shirt, and I said, hon, I'm interviewing Alvin next week. I need that shirt. You're the only guest I've ever dressed up for because you're always so dressed off the hook. I mean, look at what Alvin's wearing, even though you can only see him from like the shoulders up. So I had to dress up for you, man.
You're awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks. So let's talk about what are some of the things you learned on that first tour and opening for Elvis. I mean, to be surrounded with such musicians as Billy Preston, give me a break. Who, by the way, I just want to mention in that fabulous Beatles miniseries, when they finally played on the roof, my wife and I could not believe how much of him they did not show during the performances. It was amazing. And he was so much a part of that sound, but still, even just to have him a part of all that was just such a blessing for the Beatles, for Billy, and most of all, for all of us music fans. Just what a genius. That must have been such a thrill. I mean, I'm sure you learned some things from him as well as the other people in the band, let alone little Richard. But what are some of those big first lessons at such a young age on the road?
Well, uh, we kid around when we say, uh, shut up, but, really a lot of the stuff that you see and you hear, you just don't mention and you don't talk about it. So we learned that, hey, what you hear here, what you see here, what you say here, let it stay here. And it's like here. But one of the things I've learned is how to negotiate and to stick to what I'm negotiating. And it's like Richard's, he was really amazing with how he would go about doing that. I remember Don Rickles calling his room, and Richard had this little box that he carried with him that you could take the receiver of the phone. Back in the day, we didn't have speaker phones back in the day like that. So Richard had this little box that he would stick the phone in, and it would have the speaker, so it would amplify, the conversation. You could hear
Wow.
people talking. Richard was way on it.
That's
And
cool.
so Gunn Rickles called him, and he was booking a place called the King's Castle in Lake Tahoe. And so he was all excited. He called Richard. He said, Richard, ooh, Richard, he said, honey, he said, listen, we need you at the King's Castle. And Richard said, oh, honey, he said, I could imagine that you would want the king in the castle. If you got a castle, a castle ain't no good without the king. Even Elvis Presley called little Richard King. And so Rickles was asking, well, Richard, how much do you charge for an engagement? Richard said, $50,000. And Don Rickles said, oh, $50,000? He said, Richard, we never paid anyone $50,000 to play the King's Castle. Richard said, honey, that's because you've never had anyone like me that you've asked to play the King's Castle. He said, the only reason.
That's got to be the equivalent of $500,000 today, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah, but Richard was sticking to his guns. He was like, honey, he said, well, he said, we can't afford it. He said, I don't even know if we can't come up with it. He said, well, Richard had, he was speech impediment. He stuttered.
Yeah.
And he'd go off on, if you can't come up with the money, you could always ask your mama to do the gig.
That's hilarious. I love that you shared that particular story because I remember 2 or 3 years ago, you and I were talking, and I won't mention the artist, but you were telling me about this gig you got asked to do, and you turned it down for that exact reason as well, because they weren't going to meet your, what you were negotiating. And I respect you so much for sticking to, this is my business and this is how I do my business. Are you in or are you out? Simple as that.
Yeah, and that's. I mean, there are some times that you can negotiate with people and kind of try to work. What I've learned is it's a collaborative effort, and collaboration says, when I'm in this with others, I'm working with others, But when you want to be a dictator and unilateral versus collaboration, unilateral decision making. I mean, it's people. I don't know about you, but me as a unilateral decision maker, I'm not too good at that. So I got to check with a few people. I got to check with you, your wife, my wife, see what Billy Amendola has to say about it.
Right.
Check with my friend, Dan. Denny Sidewell, I might call him Denny.
Right.
And ask Denny about it and say, what do you think, buddy? And then that way I can make a better decision after I've talked with others. But it's so much better having this backup in a team that you can discuss with people. And that's one of the things I actually learned from Richard. Richard had people that he surrounded himself with, and that he talked with, and he would ask questions, and he would hold court at night, and people like Three Dog Night, Cher, and Keith Richards, and Ike Turner, and Tina would come, and all these famous people would hang out around him, and presidents, kings and queens,
Wow.
presidents from other countries. God, just Sheikh, the Sheikh of Iran once. I remember meeting the Sheikh of Iran
Wow.
and Sheikh Adina. I don't know, all these different names of leaders, and I'm like, they were all there to see Richard, and so I don't know. Basically, I learned to dress from Little Richard. I
Yeah.
still got wear my little dress stuff from Richard, and I don't know. It just hasn't went away. Even though sometimes I don't dress, I don't dress up. I just feel like I want to be normal. I just want to be normal. I don't want to be looked at as a being in a band. I just want to
Yeah.
be a guy with a T-shirt,
Yeah.
with some blue jeans, and
You,
just let
you
me.
know, it's funny when I put this on, I thought, okay, I bought this shirt. I'm dressing up for the guy. He's probably going to show up in a Laker jersey since I'm doing this or something.
Well, I thought about it, but then I thought, well, you know what? Somebody said, "Man, you Alvin Taylor. You gonna talk with Dan? No, you gonna talk with Dan the way that you go on stage, So, okay. So, yeah, I learned a lot of stuff from Richard. Richard was quite a negotiator. He was really, really gentle to people. He was very kind. He was very loving. And I see a lot of musicians, famous people that weren't so kind to their musicians and weren't so loving.
Yeah.
And, yeah, and then the other thing was Richard. Um, as serious as he took his business, he he had a private life, which was different from what we think because of Richard having the lifestyle that he had.
Yeah, we
We
tend
think,
to stereotype, right?
yeah, his private life, he's with some other, people, and he's got behind closed doors and they're doing their thing. And well, no, Richard was a guy that he would come out of the makeup and come up out of, and go do, normal stuff. And Richard once, I remember he took a hiatus, and I didn't know what a hiatus. I was too young, and I said, "Hey Billy," I says, "Richard's getting ready to take a hiatus." And he said, "I said he told me he's taking a hiatus." I called it a hiatus. I didn't know any better. And I said, "Billy, what's a hiatus? I never heard of one." And Billy said, "A hiatus." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, where'd you get that from?" I said, "Well, Richard said he's going to take one. He's going to take a hiatus." And Billy started laughing. He said, he said, "A hiatus." And he said, "Well, Alvin, what that means is that um, Richard is going to take a vacation." He said, "What that means for Richard is that he's going to go and take a vacation." He said, "But what that means for you and I is that we're out of work." And that's when Billy Preston turned me on to Tony Jones, Hal David, and a bunch of people that were Norman Whitfield, Frank Wilson, a bunch of producers over at Motown, and I ended up doing, the Jacksons individually, collectively, Rick James, Tina Marie, The Temptations, Smokey Robinson, The Miracles, Med
Oh,
Stevie,
wow.
all these people. So I got a chance to do all my uh, sessions with Billy at the helm, teaching me and bringing me into that field. I became a studio drummer. But one of the things that I really learned about Richard was that, yeah, you get what you want, and if you're working with people, make them do what you need them to do, but that doesn't work too well for me. That's what Richard did. And, because he was the boss, he had to kind of run a show the way he wanted to run it. And if
Right.
19 of the people So we were 18 people, 18-piece band, including Richard. So if 17 people wanted to do something different than Richard, Richard was like, well, I'm going to fire all 17 of you and get a new band. And he could do that.
Yeah, who wouldn't want to take that gig?
Yeah, exactly. So Richard was like, hey, it's my way or the highway. And so we had to do things the way Richard wanted to do it. And, but so I learned how not to be that way. When I grew up, I said, well, you know what, I want to work with people. I want to get their idea. I want to get their concepts. I want to see what they think as well and kind of try to do things that look different. Not that what Richard was doing was bad. I think that's what Richard needed for that time to be who he was. That's what made him Little Richard, the king of rock and roll. And like I said, Elvis Presley every night would stop by our dressing room, and when we were on, he would go with the two drummers that he had. Both of the drummers, we called it, one of them called Pooh Bear, Michael Beard, and I can't remember the other drummer's name. Anyway, he was.
Ronnie Tutt.
Tutt.
Ronnie Tutt, yeah.
Ron Tutt, yeah. Both of them cats. Both of them were playing drums at the same time. Yeah. And it would be the two drummers and Elvis. I could see their heads out, like behind the curtain, just kind of like looking out. And it used to inspire me because I'd be like, okay, I'm going to show them something. And I'd do, some little kid stuff that I'd, like showing out, It's like, okay, it was funny. This is what it looks like playing drums at Guitar Center. And then what it looks like playing drums at Guitar Center when another drummer walks in.
Right. Or Frank Sinatra and Sammy.
Yeah, it was really cool. When I saw those guys, they really got me motivated and got me really doing some good stuff. So
that's awesome.
I'm grateful for Ron Tutt and grateful for Pooh Bear, Michael Beard, name. Yeah. And they used to watch me, and I was encouraged by that. But those were some of the things that I learned. The one thing that really I learned from Richard was consistency when it comes to a backbeat and where the drum is supposed to land. Yeah. If you couldn't do that, then you couldn't be in Richard's band. And every once in a while, Richard would get a little frustrated. He'd go, watch the shoulder, watch the shoulder. And the music would go, watch my shoulder.
That's perfect.
And if you couldn't get on beat with the shoulder, then you get fired. So,
wow.
He showed me how to keep the rhythm going and be consistent with the backbeat.
That's cool. I want to show a clip from a drum solo. This is from a promo video from 2015 or something, but we sliced out the drum solo, and folks, watch this. This is great. Check this out. We'll be right back. Check this. I just love that. And I love that crazy setup from the guy who has a crazy setup. I just love that. But what is with those people like talking during a drum solo? Why didn't they get kicked out? Well, anyways, that is so cool and so clean. I think you know which one I played. You could probably hear it. Do you remember what year that was?
I'm not sure. Was that with Eric Burdon, or was that a combination of
That was, yeah, I think that was Eric Burdon, actually. Yeah. It's the very red video, not the Leo Sayer one, which I'm also going to show it towards the end.
called
Yeah.
River of Blood, where there's just a drum solo?
Yeah.
Yeah, that boy, that was probably 1972.
Wow.
Well, shirt off, I had my shirt off, right?
Yeah. Yep.
All, I had never ever in my life ever seen a drummer with his shirt off playing. So I decided to be the first guy to do it. So I did it. I took my shirt off, not because I just felt like trying to show my beautiful body off or anything like that. It was just really hot trying to play the solo. And I thought, you know what? They don't pay me enough money to ruin shirts every night. If they want me to do a drum solo, I'm taking my shirt off. And then I started getting attacked by girls on stage, and
That's great.
back on.
I love it. So you ended up going into studio work. What was the learning curve, if any, and what were like 2 or 3 of the biggest lessons you learned in from whom? I know obviously to be a studio musician, you got an X, you got a Y, you got a Z, but what are some of those X, Y, Zs for you, and who were they from?
Well, I got to tell you, man, George Harrison of the Beatles, amazing artist, executive producer, musician, guitarist. I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
He was a creative genius. And George taught me something that I never thought about when it comes to music. When he hired me for the 33 and a third album, which we'll probably talk about later, one of the things that he did was sit me down. Now, I was in a fireplace. I had the atmosphere by the fireplace. He had a 12-string guitar, and he played all the songs from the album.
Oh.
And as he was playing them, he was talking the songs down. And he was telling me that the reason I'm doing this like this is because you're an actor in this movie here. This is a movie, and you're an actor, and I'm giving you a part. I want you to see your part. And so I'm not going to write your part out for you. You're going to have to kind of imagine what your part would be. So when I play this song and I'm telling you where the story came from and how this, when you see this part here where the guy should fall down the steps, like, kind of like fall down, you're going to do a kind of, that's kind of get that idea. And so I'm like thinking, I'm hearing this, I'm like, wow. So this is the first time I'd ever conceptualized playing drums as like, wow, I'm an actor that's playing a part, and my drum sound is going to be a part. It's like it's communicating, and it's like without writing the music out, we're just kind of coming up with a concept and an idea. And George was just it's kind of like an executive director for a movie, more like. And so I learned that I could play parts like that for people, and that was quite a learning. Actually, people talk about a curve.
Yeah.
It was a learning cliff. Learning cliff. That was totally unbeknownst to me. I had never known or never thought of anything like that.
Did you apply it thereafter in other situations? Did it open up your mind a whole new way of thinking about how you play, what you play with whatever music you're called on?
Yeah, whatever I call on, whatever I do, I'm doing it now with you, on this show, interacting. I'm learning how to interact. And and to be a part, to be present,
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that I'd be playing and I'm like, look at over here. So he's like, hey, over here, right here. Okay, right there. Okay, okay. And so it's like, it's the same thing that I learned uh, that helped me to navigate through life so wonderfully. Is I would go to a party sometime. Sometimes we'll have a family gathering, and there'll be people there that bring their cell phones, and but boy, I'll get on the cell phone the first time, and I'd be like, and then my wife would reach over and smack my hand, whack, and I'm, oh my goodness, so I had to put my cell phone away. And then I realized, wow, that I need to be present. I don't need to be on my cell phone, So I don't even take my cell phone now when I go to a family gathering and hanging out with the grandchildren. I'm just, 13 grandchildren, um, uh, actually 14, and 5 great grandchildren.
Oh wow! So you got me beat on that last part. On the first part, we have 19 grandchildren so far, and I know we're gonna have more because one of my sons got married, and I know they'll have kids. But great grandchildren, wow, that's awesome. What's the age range of those?
Oh boy. Well, the newest one is probably about 6 months.
I remember when you were posting about that.
Yeah, and then we go from 6 months to 3 years to 8 years, and those are the great grandchildren. Then I think the
Wow.
oldest might be 12, and boy, I don't know all the ages right off the top of my head
Yeah, that's
because
okay. I
and,
can't name everybody either.
yeah,
The youngest and the oldest.
and we'd be here all day.
Yeah.
But the oldest, I think, is probably about 30 right now.
Okay.
The grandchildren.
Grandchildren. Great.
Yeah. We got, I mean, yeah. What's it? No, I'm sorry, about 27.
27.
Uh, but we have 3 boys and a girl, and they are in their 40s, the oldest. So we're enjoying life with our children, and like I said, those are not getting off subject too much, but
Yeah, that's okay. It's about you.
yeah, I've had to learn how to stay focused. With the artists that I'm playing with, and I have to learn how to be present with them. A lot of people, drummers, they hear music and they're off. They're gone, off to see
Yeah.
the wizard. And it's like, hey, right here, buddy. Look, here I am.
Yeah.
Here's where the temple is, and here is where everything is at. And so if we're not there, and if we're not consistent with that, it could really be the fall of a groove, the fall of a concept. I mean, the song. As a drummer, I have to play for the song,
Yeah.
not how fancy I am as a drummer. Listen at this turnaround. Watch for this one. Here it comes. Bang!
Yeah.
Oh, did you hear that, baby? Ooh, there before. So yeah.
It's funny because we all know what you're talking about. That's why that's so funny. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's what I learned from a lot of the cats that I work with. But I had to mention George. I love him so much and appreciate what he's taught me. And Billy Preston had to have probably, I would say, was the most amazing musician all around because this guy could play Bach, Beethoven.
Yeah.
I mean, he well-rounded from classical to jazz
Yeah.
to I mean, you name it, he could play it.
Yeah.
He was,
And just compose right on the spot. You know, he was such a great improviser, right?
Right there. I mean, it's like, oh, what key, what key, what key? All right, boom.
Yeah.
There's 10 other changes, but as long as you get him in on the first key, you know, he's right there when the other changes go. Whenever it goes, like when yeah,
Was Billy the path to George?
yes, absolutely.
That's
Well,
great.
indirectly, but still directly, pretty much. You know,
Yeah.
had I not been working with Billy, I would not have gotten the gig with the Stair Steps. The five Stair Steps who did the song "Ooh Child, Things Are Gonna Get Easier."
Yeah.
Uh, George um, signed them to his label, Dark Horse Records.
Mm-hmm.
Billy Preston was producing with Robert Margaloff, Stevie Wonder's producer. And Billy asked me to meet Kenny Burke, the bass player and the leader of the band, to see if we could hit it off. And we locked eyes. And when we just saw each other, we were in. It's like, oh, this is it. And I hadn't even played yet, you know. But then I heard this guy play, and I was like, whoa. And he heard me play, and he was like, whoa. And it was just a marriage right there, man.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but George Harrison walked in the studio to hear us rehearsing at Billy's studio out in Topanga Canyon Ranch. And
ranch. Yeah, that's where I grew up, right near there. Yeah.
Yeah. Billy had a ranch out there in Topanga Canyon. And George came to the studio and he asked the question, my God, who's that drummer? And Billy said, oh, that's Alvin Taylor. You got to meet him. And I said, oh, I want to meet him. Next thing I know, George is calling me, asking me to play on his album. So
wow. And he's had some other very legendary drummers, Mr. Kettner, of course, Alan White, who went on to play with Yes. Ian Pace from Deep Purple played on one of the albums. I mean, just an amazing lineup of studio and other musicians that played on his stuff. We have like 15 minutes left. I want to make sure people see even more of your playing. So I'm going to play another clip and ask some more music questions. This is Alvin with Bob Welch. And what I love about this, not only the playing, but back then, so much more so than now, it was like, it is what it is. And what I mean by that is what it is. You can see old videos of Genesis with Phil Collins playing drums with Peter Gabriel out front. And Phil will have a drum turned upside down and you can tell the bottom head's all beat, you know, like they didn't change the head. They just flipped over the drum. You know, the whole attitude about gear was so different. Like you just got a great sound out of whatever the F you had. So in this video, notice the bite taken out of the top hi-hat cymbal, and it doesn't matter. The music still rocks. The drumming's great. Check this out, folks. So cool. And the setup, again, just these different setups. I love that stuff. It's great. One of my musical questions I have to ask, I'm going to go back to reminding people and those who missed the beginning, some of the people you've played with. We talked about George Harrison. We talked about Little Richard. There was Billy Thorpe, Sammy Hagar, Sly and the Family Stone, Natalie Cole, America, Cher. I mean, Elton John, the list goes on and on. So my question for you is, given that family of many different types of musicians and music that people know you for, is there whether you want to call it a guilty pleasure or a band or type of music that you enjoy that people don't know you for, but might be surprised to know, like, oh, wow, he's a big Black Sabbath fan, or polka, or, Celtic music, or whatever? Is there other stuff outside of what you've been involved in that you really like?
Well, I've always been pretty secretive about it because a lot of time when people find out what you like, they're like, man. For instance,
Then they stereotype you that way, right?
exactly, I grew up being known as a rock and roll drummer. So all these people were hiring me for rock and roll. And when I tried to get a gig as a jazz drummer, they're like, you don't know nothing about jazz.
Right.
You're a roll drummer, or, hey, Barry White, well, you don't know nothing about, the kind of soul music that I'm doing. So, but, when they hear you, then it's a whole different thing. You're in the door, but
Yeah.
you get stereotyping and it's like they stop you at the door. You don't get a chance to get in. So, I've never really exposed what I like most.
Okay.
I like to say that I like it all. I love everything, but my roots basically is gospel, and my roots is jazz and gospel. Because really, I hate to say this, but there's no such thing as gospel. You know, uh,
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
I mean, gospel music, because first of all, gospel is the word, the spoken word.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't have they call it the good news. The gospel is the good news. The good news is supposedly that this person died and that, he's the savior of the world and da 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 da. So if you're listening to music, I mean, where are you hearing that at in the music?
Yeah.
How can the music be gospel? So music is just music. So I love music, and I think all music really originates from somewhere, and a lot of the stuff that I hear are jazz riffs that I've heard. Like some kid to come up with a line, and he's like, hey, wait a minute, that's on Gentle Thoughts with Herbie Hancock, or that's so you hear these jazz licks,
Yeah.
Danny Cordell. Anyway,
That's cool.
uh, so I like jazz to make the whole thing,
Yeah.
but I'm a rock and roll drummer. I'm known for rock and roll,
Yeah.
and I can play some R&B.
That's cool. Well, here's a question for you. You've, been playing for how many years? Fair to say 60-ish?
Um,
Which is weird because you're only 52, but we won't worry about the math.
I wish. I'm actually 69, and I'll be 70
In March, right?
March 26th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Congratulations. That's great. We're 10 years apart. I'll be 60 about a week later, April 2nd.
Awesome.
We have to get
Nice.
together and that'll be a party. So in those many years of playing, what do you think are some of the best or most interesting, whichever you want to pick, advances in drumming gear? I'm sure you've seen how cymbals are made, hardware, shells, heads. Stuff evolves over time. What are some of the things you think have evolved forward and not as opposed to just like, it's not as good as it used to be? Because there's some of that too, of course.
Well, I like the triggering. I like the idea that I can get any sound that I want. Um, the backfire of a pipe from a exhaust pipe from a vehicle
Yeah.
to a submarine sound, or any type of sound, a cat meowing,
Yeah.
just from the drum head. And I think that's pretty awesome. That I remember when the drum machines came into effect. Everybody was against it, and I was like, "Wow, drumming's really incomplete without it." Not that it's all that great, but
It's just
'cause they
another
put,
instrument.
well, it put a lot
Right.
of guys to work.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And one producer told me, he said, "Well, the reason he likes it is because, first of all, number one, he's always on time. Number two, he doesn't argue back.
Don't
And
have to feed them.
number three, you don't have to pay him.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay him." So it's one producer's perspective. But anyway, the fact is that there's so many other things that a person can do if you're open-minded,
Yeah.
rather than sitting behind a drum set. You can hit a drum and trigger the sound that you want. So I think that's pretty amazing, and they're getting better and better at how to do that.
Yeah. Do you remember? It was about this big, the big Lindrum machine. Remember that?
Yeah, yeah,
It
the Roger Lynn drum machine.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
weighed like 35 pounds. It was like the size of a giant industrial typewriter. Thing was huge. Now all that stuff is in an app.
yeah. There was talk about, now I don't know how true it was. I remember talking back to, I think it was either Gadsden or Picaro back in the day, that they have one of my parts in there. I think whether it was a hi-hat or a snare, I'm not sure what it
Oh,
was. That drum, that whenever you hit it, my sound was in it. So I never got a chance to find out because I wanted to talk to Roger Lynn about how I'm supposed to get paid for that.
yeah, exactly. Cool. Thanks for talking about that stuff. What do you have going on now? Let's talk about that. What can people look forward to, and how can they follow you, stay in touch with, keep their finger on the pulse of what you've got going on?
Well, speaking of Billy Amendola, who I'm just so grateful to have in my life, he's an amazing guy. He is a public relations director for the Raven Drum Foundation, and which is a group of drummers that I belong to. We have a group called 12 Drummers Drumming. I think we're going to change the name because that 12 drummers is up to like 15 and getting more and more each day. Yeah, and and we have some amazing drummers there, and Billy's involved with that. We raise money for people who are faced with a lot of trauma. Trauma is just all over the place, and unfortunately, people are taking their own lives based on what's in their mind, and if we are there and can heal people through the music, in which we just recently had in Newport Beach, at the home of Glenn and Mindy Stearns. They bought some property there. They didn't pay that much. It's like $50 million for the property, which
It's a
actually,
shanty neighborhood, so that makes sense.
yeah, yeah, is the most expensive property, in fact, in all of Orange County. But the house is called, the property is called Amazing Grace, and Amazing Grace is what it is. And we had Matt Sorum and Denny
I remember
Simon.
seeing pictures of you guys from that. Yeah.
And so this isn't something that was just then. I mean, every day since that day, we've been working on stuff and doing various different things and things together. And this is kind of like, a group that I'm a part of. And, with Rick Allen
Yeah.
from Bird, he and his wife, Lauren, are our leaders. And then we have Billy Amendola and all these great drummers, man. It's just Dwayne Trucks. That I could go on forever. And,
Yeah.
Denny Sywell's a part of it.
Yeah.
Liberty DeVito.
Oh,
Yeah, and it just goes on. Franklin Vanderbilt played with Lenny Kravitz. Franklin Vanderbilt.
wow.
Yeah,
That's a great cause, too. My wife is a therapist.
yeah.
She's a professional artist and therapist, and I stay out of her business because it's all confidential, but I sometimes know like what a particular case is about. I don't need to know the who or anything. One day it's recovery, one day it's abuse, one day it's suicide watch, one day, and she became known actually as the therapist to the therapists, because therapists, imagine, helping people with that stuff all day long. So she started being the therapist for therapists, which is handy for them. And she was a nurse for 23 years, so she's got that that background of just caring for, she's naturally a nurturer, so she's a perfect fit for that. So the work you guys are doing is just fantastic. It's so important.
A chance to be around a lot of servicemen, people, Air Force, Navy, and
Yeah.
veterans, and see them heal. And it keeps moving on. We're going to be doing some other stuff. We just recently raised $68,000 for the vets, and we're able to give some of the money to the musicians on call
Great.
in out of Nashville, and for that cause. And I face a lot of trauma myself, so it's good for me to be able as well to work through a lot of the trauma, because a lot of my trauma got masked with being in the studio with George Harrison. I'm in the studio with George Harrison. I don't have a care in the world.
Yeah.
Nothing happened to me. I'm all about focusing on my music and showing and dealing with and playing my music. But then after I finish doing that, it's like, that there's that pain that's still there from the atrocity and from all the adverse conditions that have occurred in my life. And I'm able to work through it. And it's a wonderful thing. So, and I'm also managing groups, producing groups.
Yeah, you do artist development.
Yes, artist development. I have an amazing group that I'm working with right now. And also, I have a radio station that I have my own show coming out on. I haven't,
Great.
guess I'm supposed to talk about that now, but
We will when you can. Yeah.
yeah, we'll talk about it a little later on. But yeah, got a radio show coming out, and I'm able to soulful show, and so yeah, doing still recording music for movies and commercials and television shows.
Great.
As a producer and working with various different artists.
Great. That's awesome. Is your website alvintaylormusic.com?
I actually pulled my website they're reconstructing it.
Okay.
It's being redone. I don't have the best way is I think it's what is it? Oh,
We tagged your Facebook page, Alvin Taylor Music. Can they follow you there?
yeah, it's myppk / myppk.com/get and then /Alvin Taylor.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's one way to reach me, but then just Google my name.
That'll do it.
It leads you to everything that I have out there that's going on right now.
Yeah.
But like I said, I am rebuilding a website in the middle of it right now.
Great. Alvin, thank you so much for taking time on a Sunday to chat with me about your career, about lessons, about business, about music, about drumming, about gear. And we will do this another time. There's so much to talk about. We'll spend a whole episode on the making of 33 1/3. We'll talk about your radio show when you're able to talk about that. And we're going to be driving to San Diego for my son's wedding from Arizona. We'll maybe be able to take a detour and visit with you. If not, we're driving out to the NAMM show in April, and we'll hook up.
Look forward to that, Dan. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. Hang on the line while we say goodbye to everybody. Folks, thank you so much for following what we do here on Drum Talk TV. No matter when you're watching this interview, this was the first interview we did, new one of 2023. I'm honored that it was my brother, Alvin Taylor, legendary drummer and musician. Thanks, everybody. We will see you soon.